G'day YouTube, warbles on a lot here. What we're looking at is a dead tree in what used to be a wet sclerophyll forest when I was a kid. When I bought it aged 30, it was a sclerophyll forest. After paying rates for 30 years, it became a dry sclerophyll forest. And 5 years ago, after a couple of years of intense, really hot drought, really intense drought, half the forest canopy died. And since 2018, it would be fair to say that I've been living in a sometimes bushfire fuel bomb. And because I don't want to die in a bushfire fuel bomb, and because I can't afford to build a fireproof house, therefore I've had to come up with some other strategy. Back in 1994, I came home from a day trip to Waitalaba, and as we approached the highway from the east, about 10 kilometres north of here, we could see a glow on the horizon. That glow on the horizon turned out to be over on the other side of Lindy Sperling's place. And that was the first time I ever got to attend a bushfire as a volunteer helping, and I towed a bushfire fighting trailer back before those things were banned. And it was a pretty scary night. I then conducted a night hazard reduction burn around here with my son, who was 5 years old, and that was the first night hazard reduction burn that either one of us had ever put in. He had a 2-litre backpack fed super soaker. And for a long time that was enough. But in 2018, there was a corn farmer 10 or 15 miles to the west, and the people harvesting his corn, and it was dry corn, they let it grow to full size and then die standing up and dry out, and they harvest it when it's dry. It's for making cornflakes. Got to be done that way or they won't pay you for it. The harvesting equipment set fire to a paddock of corn stubble, and that set fire to the unharvested paddock, and I was 500 metres away from here, and I found myself walking through fallout like you see depicted in post-atom bomb scenarios. Grey ashes falling down out of the sky. I was under an ash attack, and it was pretty hot and it was pretty dry and it hadn't rained for a while, and the wind was blowing these ashes from 10 kilometres away and dropping them on my place. And I looked at me one airport firefighter with its 13 metres of hose and me nozzle that was made out of plastic, and I'd repaired it with nylon Venetian blind cord and araldite. And I thought, you know, I think I better upgrade my firefighting system. And if you count the tree surgery to get rid of the dead trees, and the sprinklers pre-positioned on tripods, and nylon lay flat hoses to feed those sprinklers, 25mm, 36m safety hose, flaked and with a spare nozzle and a valve so that you can change nozzles in the field if one of them clogs up. 5,000 litres, 26,000 litres. When it's full, another 6,000 litres. 2 firefighting pumps. A third one down there at my neighbour's bore tanks. Each one of them's got 22,000 litres in it, and the one on the left is his spare tank, full as a goog, and I've already prepaid for about 10,000 litres of the water that's in it. And there's a pre-positioned delivery line, so I can pump water from the electric bore tanks up to my holding tanks, and that 25mm industrial agricultural sprinkler 5 metres up in the sky throws out a 17-metre radius wet dome, which covers pretty much out to here and runs along there, and essentially I've got my little empire wetted down. So when I cop an ember attack coming at me from the east or the west, this is all going to be wet ground. And not only, but also, the plan is to put the outrigger sprinklers, 3 of them on the upwind side, to compensate for the wind blowing me wet dome away downwind. So when the embers come in, that's what they land on, wet ground. And as you've seen in the footage, it gets dark when you're fighting fire under a thick cloud, so we have floodlights. And there's kind of sort of a bit of a reason why my driveway runs in a circle and all of my toys are inside that ring of bare earth and rocks under the wet dome from the Tower of Light and Shower. If you're going to live somewhere that's likely to burn, you have a responsibility to do something about it. This, I think it's cost me $17,000. And yet, when I got an ember attack, I didn't have time to use any of that. Okay, look over there at the trees on the hill on the horizon, and you see how they're all blackened? That's the near side perimeter of a 61 hectare or 240 acre backburn, which my son put in over there about 6 weeks ago in order to contain 2 lightning strikes pretty close to each other on the hill on the other side of that ridge. If we swing across here and we look at the overhanging tree, just in beyond the base of that tree is where I had a spot fire 6 weeks ago. And I'm halfway between my front gate and where the spot fire was. And that spot fire came in and landed there as an ember attack, and it was 900 metres downwind of the ignition point, which was caused by the local rural fire service led by my son, the group officer. They found a patch of unburnt vegetation and they were blacking out following their containment burn, and they just lit that up and they got it burning nicely, and the wind doubled in strength and swung 45 degrees and put the ember attack right over the top of his father while he was having a shower. Luck of the draw, they were doing all the right things. Oh, we have some avian observance. Anyway, they prefer not to be watched. As you can see, the fuel load on this west-facing sun-baked hill, downhill and upwind of where I live, not my ideal place to be discovering a spot fire. Not with, I don't know, 45 perhaps miles an hour of wind. But here's the spot fire, and as I say, it's roughly the size of a small motor car. Head high up this tree. If I'd not found this when I found it, 10 minutes later, all that would have been on fire and it would have worked its way across, and I couldn't have got back into my place because that's the access. So, yeah, if I hadn't have found this and called it in and put it out and sort of contained it with 12 out of the 16 litres on me firefighting backpack that lives in the back seat footwell of my car, I don't think I'd have a house. Right, so I empathise very strongly with all of the 10,000, 15,000 householders who've lost their camp in Los Angeles and its environment. I've been facing that problem for years and years and years, but I think the difference is I've been aware of it since I first came and moved in to live in a bushfire fuel bomb. I don't think they understood. It's not possible to live with this kind of fuel load on the ground around your feet and not be aware of it. But the people who have bought houses using borrowed money, and they had to insure their mortgages when they took the mortgages out, to live on housing estates built initially on the flat floors of the canyons leading up into the foothills, but then as bulldozers and real estate agents became more and more ambitious, they just kept digging roads and house pads onto the hills and then selling the land to people who didn't know that they were buying a bushfire fuel bomb. And because Los Angeles is in earthquake territory, whereas in South Korea it's a flood zone, so the building code says everything you build out of concrete has to be flood proof, and that's why the localizer's radar antenna mounting on the end of the runway was 2 metres high, concrete reinforced rammed earth wall, because it was built as a flood levee. It's the only kind of earth bank they knew how to build, I suppose. In Los Angeles, in the bushfire fuel bomb, in a wind tunnel. It's a wind tunnel because they've got a 10,000 foot high mountain to the west of it, and apparently any time you get a high pressure zone sitting north of Los Angeles, because high pressure zones rotate clockwise in the northern hemisphere, that takes the air beside the high pressure zone, rotates it clockwise, and that brings it over the edge of a 10,000 foot mountain, and it falls down the slope. And as it falls down, it gets squeezed together and becomes denser, so it falls faster. And that's a self-reinforcing feedback cycle. And as it falls and becomes denser, it heats up. So if you were going to have a 10 degrees Celsius day, you get hit with a 25 degrees Celsius wind at, as in the case, 40 to 80 miles per hour, gusting to over 100 at one place at one time for one moment. But imagine trying to fight an ember attack if you had fuel scattered around like this and that kind of wind at 10% humidity. And the poor buggers were copping all of that in the middle of their winter. It's not their fire season. So because in America the firefighters are contracted, they get laid off in the winter. And because they're contracted, they're not volunteers who are offered free training like happens here. During the winter, they're supposed to go and re-qualify, and they have to go and pay somebody to retrain them and give them an exam and make sure they can still work as a firefighter. Haven't forgotten it or got too fat. And this means that a whole lot of the firefighters who you would normally have in the summertime, suited and booted and ready to put on the ground, not there. They were off somewhere else looking for an accredited organisation to recertify them to go firefighting. Whereas here in Australia, in New South Wales at least, the Rural Fire Service owns some firefighting aircraft, and they contract air operators to fly them and maintain them, but RFS owns the airplane. Nobody else takes it away to do some other bloody thing. They also contract other people to come in, and for years in our fire season, we've been using unemployed North American aerial firefighting appliances. They just cross the equator and fight fire in our summer and go back there and fight fire in their summer. Los Angeles has just lost 15,000 houses in the middle of winter. I don't think we're going to be getting too much aerial support from Northern America next summer. Don't know how much we've got now. I bet if they've got any large air tankers down here waiting on the runway, they're wishing they were back home. I think the days of trans-equatorial firefighting, they're probably over. And how would you feel if you were 12,000 miles away and your hometown was getting burnt to the ground because you weren't there to turn out with your local brigade? Nobody wants that to happen. And then there's the matter of the water. I'm on top of a hill. I've got a stockpile of water in my front yard, and I've got pumps that I can start and put through hoses that I own and I maintain, and I've got it ready to go because I worry about it. Because that is what the forest floor looks like where I have not been maintaining it. Over here, I've been brush cutting it because I want something short and green on the ground that's more difficult to burn than waist-high, dead, dry grass. Now, how many of the people who live in the earthquake zone in Los Angeles in houses which are designed to be earthquake safe? So they're really lightweight and flimsily constructed, so if they fall down in an earthquake and they hit you, they might break your arm, but they're probably not going to grind you into 3 pieces. Okay, so this lightweight, flimsy construction in the bottom, right beside the bloody ocean, at the foot of a 10,000 foot mountain that turns into a wind tunnel anytime you get that high pressure zone sitting up to the northeast of Los Angeles. On the other side of the mountains, yeah, that all becomes a wind tunnel, and it gets hot, dry, high-speed air running down those gullies. I'll lay a bet none of the people who bought those houses or built those houses had any idea that that's what happens. But I'll also bet that when the white men first showed up from Spain to start living there, the local yokel Indians said, don't live over there. When them winds come down, it gets very, very hot, and if your fire starts up, you'll never, ever escape from it. And somebody who came from Europe thought they knew better. So they built there anyway, and they got away with it for a long time. And for a long time, global warming wasn't on the sort of accelerated exponential curve that we've been on this past 30 years. I can remember when they were arguing over whether there'd been 0.5 of a percent, 0.5 of a degree. And now they're admitting to 1.5 degrees. I've been seeing closer to 2.5 degrees around here. If you look at the midwinter overnight minimums, we're seeing 15 or 18 degrees Celsius higher than it should be. If you look at where it doesn't snow anymore, the effects are profound. And whereas you used to get little perturbations either side of the average, now, yeah, the average is up a bit, but the perturbations are freaking huge. Every time the circumpolar jet stream breaks down, a jet of frigid air comes howling down into the temperate zones as if the poles are trying to cool us off by giving us a snowstorm that we've forgotten how to deal with because we haven't had regular snow for so long. And into all this, Trumpy. Donald J. Trump, they're going to inaugurate him in Augur 8. Screw into place. You know, an auger is something that screws in. They're going to screw him into place in 10 days. Or not. 7 days, what is it? 14. 6 days. It occurs to me that Trumpy, he has been demanding to be put in the White House. He's been demanding that he's the only person who can deal with all of these problems. And he sort of reminds me of the proverb, epitaph, be careful what you wish for or be careful what you pray for because you're almost certain to get it. He's been demanding this position for a long, 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 long time. It remains to be seen whether the Pentagon is going to sit still and watch him be inaugurated or whether they're going to make a decision an executive decision that America's got a better chance of returning to being a constitutional democracy if it's recovering from a coup administered by a junta and setting up free and fair elections later than if they sit on their hands and put a complete fucking clown show in the White House and the Pentagon, as well as Congress and the Senate. And I don't know which way they're going to jump, but I know what they grew up being taught to think like, and I just cannot imagine that they're going to stand there and learn to do the Aryan salute, Sig Heil, victory, hurrah. But I might be wrong. Maybe they will put him in. Let's just assume that my deep gut belief in the power of human good nature and the tendency of the American military to at least try to do the right thing to defend their nation from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Let's say I'm wrong about that, just like I was wrong about the American population voting to stick fucking baked beans up their nose twice, which is what they did with Trump. You know, they've had Trump, they know what he's like, and they've decided to do it again. Okay, their decision, not mine. Nothing to do with me. I'm just like everybody else on planet Mudball. We're stuck with whoever the fucking Americans vote to be the leader of their country, because whatever they make a mess of, the shit cascades onto all the rest of us. But anyway, I think Trumpy is likely to get a natural disaster, a climate weather-based problem on the scale of the Los Angeles fires, somewhere between once every 3 months and once a week, probably in an increasing crescendo during the next 4 years of his PrissyDuncie. I think by the time he's finished another 4 years, there's not going to be as much left of America as there was left of Germany in 1945, 12 years after Adolf Hitler became Chancellor. And in 4 years' time, that'll be 12 years after Trumpy was inaugurated the first time. I think he's on a parallel Hitlerian timeline. 12 years from taking power to ashes in the mouth. And the same proportion of Hitlerites who finished up compost at the end of the Second World War, that's the proportion of Trumpists and MAGA-tards who are going to be compost in 4 years' time. I don't know whether they're going to get burnt in a fire they can't run away from, or whether bird flu is going to become human communicable and Trumpy's going to get his second epidemic to make a fucking mess of. Perhaps NATO will nuke Washington in order to fucking help Denmark defend Greenland. Because if Trumpy attacks Greenland, that's a fucking foreign power attacking a NATO country. That ought to be fun. The Canadians have had him up to here, the Mexicans have had him up to here, the Panamanians have had him up to here, and now he reckons that if the Israelis don't get all of the hostages back in Gaza, he's going to drop hellfire and damnation onto all of Gaza, because he's a fucking infantile bully. He's got no grasp of the facts. He come out there claiming that water released in Northern California for the benefit of a fish, which he hates the name of the fish. It's a smelt of some kind. He hasn't eaten one, so therefore it's no good for anything. He reckons that's why there were fire hydrants on the upper reaches of the foothills of the suburbs, which shouldn't have been built in a bushfire fuel bomb in a fucking blast in a blast furnace in a wind tunnel. That's the other thing. They've had 0.16 of an inch, 16 points. Right? 1 millimetre is 4 points. So they've had 4 millimetres of rain in the last 8 months. They would normally have had about 100 millimetres. They would have had, 4 inches at least, maybe 6 or 8 inches. And they had record high temperatures in their summer and their autumn. So not only have they had no rain, they've had really hot baking temperatures, and now they've got the low humidity, really high speed winds. no hope for them. Best thing they could have done was tell everybody to run away, and that's what they did. If they've lost 15,000 houses and only 24 people have been turned into crispy critters, that is the best firefighting response you can ever hope for. I heard somebody express it in terms of, at 10-mile-an-hour wind speed, I am a firefighter. If it's over 30 miles an hour of wind speed, I am an observer. If it's over 60 miles an hour of wind speed, I'm running away. Yeah? And on the topic of running away, once again, the stories are coming out about people who didn't run away, but they prepared. Now, admittedly, their idea of preparing was to put garden sprinklers on the roof, poor man's version of what I've done, for as long as the water pressure remains in the mains. And they walked around wetting their house down with a hose. And the fire burnt all around them, and all their neighbours' houses from the runaways burnt to the ground. But they stayed in situ and they put their spot fires out, and yeah, some people can be lucky. What I've done out here with my brush cutter, sheet mulching, trying to put some topsoil on top of the rocks to hold some moisture. And if my neighbour's sheep eat it and they shit on the rocks, that's all good compost. And the idea is that bare rocks don't burn, but green grass doesn't burn either. So if I can slow the fire down as it comes up that hill and it runs into the area that I've brush cut, it's going to be even easier to stop when it gets to my wet dome, which extends to this side of the house. But how can somebody who's working 2 or 3 jobs on a minimum wage to meet their mortgage, how can they save up to get enough firefighting gear to protect their little house? And then, apparently, 6 months ago, when the temperature went right up and the rain stopped, that's when all the actuaries, the people at the insurance company, who look at the long-term weather in hindsight, and they did not used to be able to use forward extrapolations of weather data. There was actually a law on the books that stopped them from looking forward and seeing what was coming. That law came off the books about 8 months ago. And 6 months ago, the insurance company said to all of the people living roughly where the fires have burnt them out, we're not going to renew your policy. You've got insurance until your policy runs out, but we are too scared that your house is going to burn down for us to want to write you a policy. We don't want to be responsible for the debts if and when your house burns down, because we don't think it's if, we reckon it's a when. And there are some people who think, what a terrible thing, how dare they? For years and years and years, when I didn't think my house was going to burn down, I paid them a little tiny bit of money in the knowledge that if everything went wrong and a rare event happened, they would pay me off. Now that I'm certain my house is going to burn down, they don't want to take my pittance. What a bunch of arseholes. Why won't they take my little bit of money and let me breathe easy in the knowledge that their shareholders will bail me out of the consequences of living in a fucking stupid place? I don't expect anybody to bail me out. That's why I've spent 17 grand on firefighting planning. And if on the day you haven't got time to use the firefighting gear, you use what's in your car and you run out and you take on the fire straight away. Just like the people in Los Angeles who did manage to keep their house. I don't know how many tried to keep their house and got cooked while they were doing it. I don't know how many fought to the end and then run away and come out of it knowing that at least they tried. But I think the ones who tried and got away without any eyebrows, they're going to feel better about themselves than the people who took the first heads up, run away, and they got a long way away, and they come home and they find that there's nothing for blocks in every direction because there was nobody to take on the embers. Now, where the old idea of stay and defend and the new idea of run away because there's no hope. Where those boundaries are, I don't know. Hopefully I won't get too much closer than I did when I was playing with a bloody spot fire in the middle of a bushfire fuel bomb, which is identical to the one that 2 days earlier my son had raised 30 metres of flame height when you burn that slope. Because I don't know how good I would have been over there with all of me 56,000 litres of water and 3 fire pumps going simultaneously at stopping a 30-metre fire front in a 45-mile-an-hour wind. Because even out here, where I've done something about the waist-high brown dry grass, there's still a bloody lot of fuel on the fire. Happily, most stuff like that's too big to be a problem in a burn over. The problem is stuff that size. That's what burns in a burn over. Little bits. 6mm across is going to contribute to the actual volatile gases that are going to be on fire coming at you. So anyway, originally this video was going to start in the hammock, and then it was going to become a chest camera video on the way to town to talk about Trumpy and the Trumpocalypse and the Hitlerian timeline and what's going on in Los Angeles. But I guess the coping with global warming and fire aspect of the conversation has kind of taken it over. I have no idea how bad it's going to get in America. I don't know what's going to be better or worse for them. If the Joint Chiefs of Staff decide to pull a coup, then at least the rest of the world gets to deal with somebody who's vaguely fucking rational in charge of America. It might not be the democratic republic that we've been used to dealing with, but at least it's not going to be a completely megalomaniacally insane dictatorship of one, augmented by every nepotistic, corrupt, incompetent, ignorant, drunken fucking half-wit he can find. Apparently, there was can you see the bees? There was a tweet from that prominent Republican sagacious fountain of wisdom, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she of the Jewish space lasers, igniting previous California wildfires. She has suggested that the authorities should use their weather modification to use cloud seeding to put out the Californian fires. So, as one commenter on the thread put it, isn't it fascinating that the fucking lunatics who think that the government can control the weather and put out mega firestorm wind-driven events claim not to believe that humanity is able to change the climate by warming the globe. Just get your head around that pair of diametrically opposed factoids. Marjorie Taylor Greene does not believe in anthropogenic global warming because humankind is not capable of affecting the climate, but she thinks the government can use weather modification to stop the wildfires. Just like a bunch of half-wits seem to think that if you've got a firefighting system that's designed to provide one set of hydrants for 2 or 3 houses on fire in one street at a time, it's not at all unusual for the higher up hydrants up the hills to be running out of pressure when you've got 200 fire trucks simultaneously pumping with all of their hoses from 200 hydrants and the city's burning down around them. Somehow that's connected to a water resource into a reservoir or out of a reservoir for the benefit of a fish. There's a bunch of mentally retarded congenital cretins who are proud parts of the MAGA movement, functioning as journalists who've been claiming that because there are 3 high-ranking career firefighters in Los Angeles Fire Department who are same-sex attracted females, therefore the reason Los Angeles is on fire is because incompetent lesbians have ruined the fire department by giving away surplus equipment to Ukraine. By training, I'm a registered general nurse. I don't look like a nurse, but I am a nurse by training. When I was training in a big city hospital, one of the observations I made was that female heterosexual nurses left school. We did a 3-year training. Then we got 5 postgraduate annual pay rises. And then the pay stayed the same unless you got more qualifications, like a midwifery certificate, a psych nursing certificate, operating theatre certificate, intensive care, cardiac care. Get other qualifications and you'll get paid on the qualification. Nursing administration, something like that. And what you would see on the wards would be a whole lot of student nurses, a whole lot of young nurses. This is in the days when nearly all the nurses were women. And then there would be a whole bunch of 35, 40-year-old female nurses whose youngest kid had started high school and they were deciding to come back and get back into the workforce, but they had been out of work, away from the game for 15 or 20 years. And while the heterosexual nurses were off playing happy families, the same-sex attracted nurses did not have that as a distraction in their lives, so they just racked up more certificates and more seniority and more experience and more skill. So by the time you're a board of hospital directors and you're looking at 2 candidates in their 40s or 50s, and one of them has got a husband and 3 kids, and the other one is part of 2 women living in a house, and they're both nurses, or maybe one's a lawyer, you're going to find it's the same sex attracted nurse who's got more qualifications because they haven't been distracted by having kids. It's not that they rise to the top because of nepotism and corruption and diversity, equity and inclusion. They rise to the top because they don't go away and do other stuff. I suspect that since women were admitted into the ranks of firefighters probably 30 years ago, a similar phenomenon has occurred where a lot of young women join the fire brigade because it's fun, it's exciting, it gives you a sense of purpose, you get a uniform issued by the government, you get trained to do all sorts of technically difficult and challenging things, and you get to go out and from time to time, if you fuck it up, somebody is going to die. And it might be you or it might be the person you trained with. So it's a good maturational experience, being part of a team facing danger and working together to get your ass home alive. But the heterosexual young women, they quite often team up with another firefighter and they go and play happy families. The same-sex attracted firefighters, they don't go off and have kids. They can stay there. So yeah, there are 3 women in the top 12 officials running the Los Angeles Fire Department, and all 3 women have got like 40 years solid experience, and they've been firefighters, they've been deputy captains, they've been senior deputy captains, they've been full red hat captains, they've, group officer, divisional commander. They work their way up because they didn't go off and spend 15 or 20 years starting with morning sickness and crappy nappies and finishing them with teenage temper tantrums. That's why the female firefighters of that age bracket, they're either fat, happy, jolly housewives, finally I've got nothing else to do, let's go firefighting, the kids are off my hands, or they're very hard, very competitive, ambitious, professional career women. It's just a phenomenon, A lot of people don't notice such things, but, the fool on the hill sort of does. And that's my guess as to why there are 3 highly competent female firefighters up in the top echelons of the Los Angeles Fire Department. And of course, if you've got an overcompensated inferiority complex because you're not very good at whatever you do, and you're a white heterosexual male, that burns. You know, that makes your dick shrivel up and fall backwards out your own ass. Have a look at the men who talk on Fox News. Listen to Donnie Trump. Overcompensated inferiority complex on legs. Look at Elon Musk. Jesus, hasn't the shit been landing about him? I was not actually aware that his father, who owned the Emerald Mine, has had 2 kids with Elon Musk's stepsister. That's why Elon and Daddy don't get along. And it's probably why Elon doesn't like gays. One of his kids is gay. Or is it trans? Yeah. Elon feels personally threatened by anything that's not normal heterosexual. And he has trouble with that because his father raised the stepdaughter and then married her and had 2 kids, or had 2 kids with her. Don't know whether Daddy married stepsister or not. But what sort of a incestuous fuckwit was he raised to be? Is that why he's got 11 children and names them after alphabet soup, randomly sprinkled on the table when you drop the bowl? I really think, considering that he lied on his immigration papers, working on a student visa or working on a visitor's visa, he should be put in a situation where his citizenship's revoked and he is deported back to South Africa. And he can go back there and be a pain in the arse and see how well he goes. Nationalise all of his bloody companies, because he wasn't a citizen, he wasn't allowed to have them. Yeah, and fix the national debt by then selling it all off to the share market, which will have a lovely time with it, because they like eating. Doesn't matter what they eat. But anyway, yeah, I think Trumpy's going to regret the day that he asked for that job. I think he will wish that he was in jail. I think the level of stress and shit and misery that's going to descend on his head when everything he touches turns to shit. It's going to be like Midas with compost. Everything he touches is going to turn to shit between his fingers. Nothing is going to go right for him, because arseholes always get their just desserts. And it doesn't matter how far out you are, notice is being taken of what you're doing. There's always someone paying attention. I look like there's nobody paying attention to me out here yapping away at the camera, but it's not actually true. If you look around, I am not being totally unobserved. Am I? Life's a bit like that, eh? And golly gosh, look at that. I might not get to ride the bike to town at all, unless I want to come home with a wet ass. That's overdeveloping. That's overdeveloping bigly. As the felonious rogue whom the Americans have chosen to lead them down the spiral, gurgly, descending hole into oblivion, would say, bigly. Just keep your heads down, all my American subscribers. Keep your heads down. The meek shall inherit the earth when the last 2 violently doubtful warrior atheists turn themselves to compost, fighting over the last can of dog food in the ruined remains of where the last supermarket used to trade. When there's nobody else left who thinks it's their right to inflict grievous bodily harm or death onto somebody else in order to make themselves feel better because they are personally angry, hungry, or frightened, when all of those assholes are dead, that's when the world will be fit for humans to live in peace and harmony. And it's an experiment that's regulated and operated by free will. Such is life. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Onward into the Trumpocalypse, eh? Ciao.